And I basically listened to that album like every day for the next 2 years. I swear to God. So I decided it would be a good time to talk to you about all of the albums that really had a huge impact on my life. I decided I wanted to break it down in chronological order, meaning I'm going to take you to as far back as my childhood, and then into my teens and early 20s. So these albums are not in a preference order, but more on a timeline of when they impacted me throughout my life. So I actually gave myself 2 rules for this video. The first one being I can't choose the same artist twice. And the second rule is that I need to have liked the entire album, at least 80% of the album. So meaning I would only skip over maybe 2 songs at max. Just a little preface, I'm going to present the album starting with the year that I discovered it and then my age. So the year that I discovered the album is not always the same year that it was released. So first on the list is Hybrid Theory by Linkin Park.
I don't know why, it doesn't even matter how hard you try. Keep that in mind, I designed this rhyme to explain in due time all I know.
I first heard In the End when my mom was driving us in her car, and it was pretty much the first time in my life that I had like a full stop reaction to a song. Like I was just like completely captivated by In the End. It was so good. And I could feel like everything in my body stop and my brain was just fully concentrated on this song. And then the second time that I heard it was on Much Music Loud. So Much Music is like the equivalent in Canada for MTV. And I was like, oh, this is a song. Mom, this is a song. I really want you to buy me the album. And after like begging her, you know, a few times, she finally bought me the album. Because back then an album was like $20, 18 or like $20. It was kind of a big investment, but I'm so glad she bought it because it's pretty much the first album in my life that I devoured like front to back. I would put it on my ghetto blaster all the time. So a few years after that, when I was 15, I discovered the album Riot from Paramore. I was with my friends. We were hanging out at CD Plus in the mall in my hometown. Riot was playing in the background for like 30 minutes during the time that I was browsing. And I remember after 30 minutes being like, wow, I liked every single song that this CD has been playing. So I went up to the clerk and asked him what the band was. And he let me know it was this up-and-coming band called Paramore. They were really good. So I bought it right there. And I basically listened to that album like every day for the next 2 years. I swear to God. It was really hard to discover new music back then. So what you had was what you would consume, and you consume it over and over again. I've always been someone who's attracted to music before lyrics, and Paramore's music was just like, it was so good. Like the drums were so progressive. I had never really heard a drummer like play so many hooks in a song. Obviously the vocals were just amazing. Like Hayley Williams' vocals were just like out of this world. I got to see them play live like 2 weeks after I turned 16, actually. It was one of my first concerts I'd ever seen. My friends and I drove from our hometown in Ontario like 12 hours to get to Montreal to get to see them play. We had rented a hotel room right across the venue, I remember this, and there were like 3 opening bands, and the tickets were like $35, and the place was like packed. It was an amazing show, and I've always had so much respect for Paramore. In 2009, when I was 17, I discovered Them Crooked Vultures. I started listening to Them Crooked Vultures because of my brother and some friends at school. I heard New Fang, and I was really captivated by this song. It was like a really great riff, a guitar riff, and being a guitarist, I was attracted to like really great guitar riffs. And then I listened to the rest of the album, and I remember being like pretty blown away by how progressive they were. They didn't seem to be following any kind of rules. They didn't sound normal, I guess. They sounded like out of this world. Like the guitar tones were great, and Dave Grohl like drum playing was full of hooks again, and it was just very interesting and very hard to stop listening to it. It was like unskippable. Every song you would want to like listen to the whole thing and be like, holy shit. It was really good. To this day, I still think that Them Crooked Vultures is one of the best albums I have ever heard in my life.
I'm fooling myself and
So maybe a year and a half, 2 years after that, in 2011, I'm 18 at this point, and I discovered Wasting Light by the Foo Fighters. My brother introduced me to this album shortly after it was released. He told me about the crazy recording process that the Foo Fighters had implemented to make this album. So instead of going to like a fancy studio, they opted to just record it in Dave's garage with like analog tape, and that it sounded very raw and it was like super garage rock. I remember he and I were in the car. We were driving back from, it was Christmas time. We were driving back from like a family reunion party thing. And it was quite a drive back. It was like an hour and a half. And while my dad was driving, my brother and I were in the back seat, and we shared an earbud to listen to the album. And we listened to it like front to back. And I was like, I remember thinking like, oh, okay, I get it now. Like I get all the hype about the Foo Fighters. Like this is really good. It's still my favorite Foo Fighters album. It's just raw. It's truly unpolished, yet it's well arranged. That same year, I'm still 18, I discovered Brothers by the Black Keys. Now, my mother had introduced me to the Black Keys maybe the same year or the year before with some of their older music, but I had only listened to like one or two songs. And then she told me to listen to this album. I used to work in a greenhouse when I was 18. I would stand next to a conveyor belt and grab some wood, put it in a bag, and these bags of wood would then be sold to campgrounds across Ontario. And it was very repetitive work. Like you're just standing there all day, like doing this, putting this on a pylon for it to then be shipped away. And I got to listen to a lot of music during that time. And one of the albums I listened to every day was Brothers by the Black Keys. I loved the simplicity of their music, and it was just very, very catchy and laid back. It was blues that wasn't overly flashy or intense. It was just like a good groove. It was chill. It would make me feel happy in my mundane job. It would, give me a little boost of joy. And I found it really cool that they were only two guys, and that only two guys were producing such a great sound. And this was one of the first albums I ever really connected with lyrics, because he was talking about love, heartbreak, loss, like a feeling of protectiveness, and while still sounding positive, which was like a new concept to me.
Someone said true love was dead, and I bound to fall for you.
The following year, in 2012, I'm 19 years old, and I discover In Rainbows by Radiohead. Up until this point, I hadn't really been able to get turned on to Radiohead. It was just too bizarre for me, and I think I lacked like the life experience to really understand their music. My little sister was listening to them when she was like in high school, if you can believe that. She loved them, and I just remember being like, I don't get it. This music is way too weird and way too depressing. But at 19 years old, I was traveling across Australia, and I had gone through my first heartbreak at that point. I was dealing with like homesickness, and a friend of mine, he was a roommate of mine, he was a big Radiohead fan. He told me to listen to the song Reckoner, and he introduced me to other music from Tom York as well. And I remember just being like, I understand this now. Like I could really deeply connect with the sadness that Radiohead conveys really well in their music, and just how amazingly different they are from anyone else. Like the percussions in 15 Step are still something I just cannot wrap my head around. The mixes in Radiohead are so amazing, and that album specifically has a really great blend of like super sad songs that will make you like tear up, to like really upbeat rock music that you can hear on an action movie, for example. Tom York's voice and incredible songwriting and storytelling just had a huge impact on me at that time. So in 2013, I'm 20 and I discover A Song for the Deaf by Queens of the Stone Age.
First it give it, then it take it away. First it give it, then it take it away.
So 2013 was a really big year for me musically because it's the year that I discovered and dove straight into a lot of bands that I still love to this day. My brother introduced me to Queens of the Stone Age through the song Mexicola. And from that point on, I kind of went through their discography, and A Song for the Deaf was really the first album that I really got into, like front to back, over and over again. I would go running to this album like all the time. And I remember it would give me so much energy because I feel like I could run forever because I didn't want to stop listening to the album. Their guitar tone was so dark and heavy and mysterious. They had an amazing blend of trance-inducing riffs and like very interesting drum hooks and a beautiful voice from Josh Homme. And their lyrics were so obscure and weird and like dark, and I didn't know what they were talking about, but I wanted more of it. So next up on the list is Pretty Hate Machine by 9 Inch Nails.
That's what I got. That's what I got.
It's 2013 again, I'm still 20. And this time, because of my little sister, I started listening to 9 Inch Nails. She had been listening to this band for years already, and kind of the same feeling as Radiohead or Queens of the Stone Age. I found it was too weird up until that point. I don't remember what the first song was that I heard. It was the first time that I discovered music with like a synth or keyboards that I actually enjoyed. Up until the point that I was a teenager, I was like a straight up rock and didn't hear anything else. I just didn't find it was good. But this opened me up to a whole other world and kind of turned me on to other genres of music. And I remember being like, how have I not known about this before? I guess I wasn't ready before that point. I specifically remember connecting with the song Terrible Lie. I felt like I deeply understood what Trent Reznor was talking about, and it was like he'd written a song about a feeling I was very familiar with. So a few years later, it's 2014, I'm 22, and I discover The Physical World by Death from Above, 1979. This is the only album I'm struggling to remember exactly what was happening in my life. I know that I had just moved to Montreal and I was kind of struggling with, the first year of moving, struggling to like become an adult and have responsibilities. When I discovered the album, I remember loving it kind of in the same way that I had loved Wasting Light by Foo Fighters. It had that same sort of raw quality. They had, a really distorted bass line, and they were also putting in heavy synth lines in there, which were super great, and like just a busy drum kit. The Physical World's an album filled with like hooks. It's just like hooks galore front to back. And I think that's when I became a true fan of them. Despite knowing of them before, this album is what really made me love them. The following year, 2015, I'm 23, and I discovered Frank by Amy Winehouse. So one evening, I'm just washing dishes, and on my YouTube autoplay, You Should Be Stronger Than Me started playing.
You should be stronger than me. You've been here 7 years longer than me.
I finished up the dishes and I just sat on the couch and listened to the whole album front to back. And I remember being like, how have I never paid attention to Amy Winehouse before? This is a freaking masterpiece. The album is recorded with a bunch of really seasoned pros musicians, and it's like some of the great jazz and blues you can ever ask for. She's just singing with so much honesty and vulnerability, and I really connected with that. And I actually got really interested in her as a person as well after that. The tragedy of her death just a few short years before had made the album even more meaningful to me, because she was just a girl going through her life and dealing with her shit the best as she could, like me, and I understood what she was talking about. She had been deeply impacted by themes like love, attraction, addiction, deception, all of which were like really relatable. And she had music to accompany these lyrics that were just like amazing. So yeah, Frank by Amy Winehouse is one of the best albums I've ever heard in my life. I want to talk about a few honorable mentions. Doolittle by the Pixies. That's the first album I ever heard of the Pixies. I discovered them when I was traveling, again when I was 19, and they were very weird, and I loved it. I still love them so much. Cold Fact by Rodriguez. Rodriguez is an amazing songwriter. It's very laid back, and there's just something very real about this man. And thirdly is an album called L'Album Monstre Première Partie from Extérieur. This is a Quebec punk rock band that I kind of grew up listening to. And this album came out, I think, when I was 16, or I think I was 17, actually. They came out with 3 albums in 1 year. And I loved like a lot of songs on this album as well. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching all the way through. That's really awesome. I hope you got something interesting out of this video. Maybe you want to listen to some of these albums. I really encourage you to, because every album on this list is something that I hold very close to my heart. Let me know in the comments if you have connected with any of these albums in the same way that I have as well. Or actually, just give me your top 10 albums in the comments. I want to know which ones are yours. Stay tuned for some more music content. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I do a lot of musical covers, musical reactions, some videos like this, and I'm also releasing some of my original music. So if you like this, go check out some of my other videos. So cheers guys, I'll see you in the next video.